Commander, Ethan's voice interrupted her thoughts. We've finished setting up the defenses. The traps are in place, and the perimeter is fortified. We're ready. Thank you, Ethan, Leora said, turning to face him. I appreciate all your hard work. We've come a long way, and we will stand together in this fight. As dawn broke, the sky turned a fierce shade of orange. Leora gathered her team once more. This is it, she said, her voice strong and unwavering. We fight for each other, for our home, and for our freedom. Whatever happens, we face it together. Cheers erupted from the troops, their spirits lifted by Leora's words. But deep down, she felt a cold knot of fear. The Aurelian forces were relentless, and she knew they would not hold back. As the morning wore on, the distant sound of engines filled the air. Leora's heart raced as she looked to the horizon, where a fleet of Aurelian ships emerged, darkening the sky. They were here. Positions, Leora shouted, her voice slicing through the air. The soldiers moved quickly, taking their places behind barricades and preparing their weapons. The Aurelian ships descended, casting ominous shadows over the base. Leora could see soldiers boarding small crafts, ready to attack. She steeled herself, adrenaline coursing through her veins. The first blasts of energy fire erupted from the Aurelian ships, striking the ground around them. Leora ducked behind cover, her heart pounding. Return fire, she yelled, gripping her weapon tightly. We can't let them breach our defenses. The battle erupted into chaos. Blaster fire lit up the sky as Leora and her team fought fiercely. They were outnumbered, but they held their ground, using their traps and the terrain to their advantage. Leora fought alongside her soldiers, moving from one position to another, coordinating their attacks. She felt a sense of unity among them. They were not just soldiers. They were family. Each life mattered, and they were willing to risk everything for one another. As the Aurelian forces pushed closer, Leora spotted a group of soldiers trying to breach the main gate. We have to hold them back, she shouted, rallying her team. Form a line. They fought with all their might, pushing back the Aurelian soldiers, but the enemy kept coming. Leora could see her friends getting hurt, and her heart ached for them. But she refused to give in. In the thick of the battle, Leora caught sight of the Aurelian commander, a tall figure clad in dark armor. This ends now, he bellowed, raising his weapon as he advanced. With her heart racing, Leora took a deep breath. We won't let you win, she shouted back, charging forward to confront him. The two clashed in a fierce battle, their weapons sparking as they struck each other. Leora fought with every ounce of strength she had, driven by the memories of her comrades and the desire to protect them. But the commander was strong. With a powerful swing, he knocked Leora's weapon from her hand. As she stumbled back, she saw the fear in her team's eyes. No, she shouted, but it was too late. Just as the commander prepared to strike the final blow, Ethan appeared out of nowhere, tackling the commander to the ground. Get away from her, he yelled, holding the commander down. Ethan, no. Leora cried, but Ethan was determined. He pushed himself up, taking the commander by surprise and gaining the upper hand. In that moment of distraction, Leora reached for her fallen weapon. She stood, steadied herself, and fired. The blast struck the commander squarely, sending him reeling back. With the commander down, the morale of the Aurelian troops faltered. They began to retreat, their forces disorganized. Leora rallied her team, determination burning bright within her. Push forward. We can't let them escape. As they charged, the Aurelian forces scattered, retreating into the sky. Cheers erupted from Leora's team, their spirits soaring as they witnessed their victory. In the aftermath of the battle, Leora's heart was heavy yet hopeful. They had fought bravely, and together they had won. As she looked at her team, she felt an overwhelming sense of pride and gratitude. They had proven that humanity was strong, and they were not to be underestimated. With the Aurelian threat temporarily quelled, Leora knew their fight was far from over. The galaxy was still a dangerous place, but they had shown their strength and resilience. They had faced the storm and emerged victorious. As the sun set over the horizon, casting a warm glow on their battlefield, Leora took a moment to reflect. They had forged a path forward, and together they would continue to fight for their future, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The battle was fierce, but Leora's team fought valiantly. They took down Aurelian soldiers one by one, their determination unwavering. Leora moved with precision, her focus on taking out the commander of the convoy. Just as she was about to reach him, a blaster shot whizzed past her ear. She ducked instinctively and turned to see an Aurelian soldier aiming at her. Without hesitation, Ethan shot back, taking the soldier down. "Thanks," Leora called out, her heart racing. "Let's keep moving," Ethan urged, and they pressed on, cutting through the Aurelian ranks. Leora felt a sense of purpose coursing through her veins. They were making progress. With their teamwork and courage, they finally reached the supply vehicles. Leora ordered her troops to start sabotaging the equipment and taking supplies. They worked quickly, knowing that time was against them. "Leora, we've got to go," Corin shouted, pointing towards the horizon. In the distance, another Aurelian squad was approaching, their ships rising into the sky. "Finish up and fall back," Leora commanded, her heart pounding in her chest. "We can't get caught here." As her team scrambled to complete their task, Leora felt a rush of triumph. They had struck a blow against the Aurelian forces, and they had shown their strength. But the danger was far from over. They had to get out before they were surrounded. With their supplies secured, they hurried back to their base, adrenaline fueling their escape. Leora felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. They had succeeded against the odds, but the Aurelian forces would not forget this attack. Once they reached the safety of their command center, Leora turned to her team, her heart swelling with pride. "You all did amazing. This victory proves we can take the fight to them." Cheers erupted from her troops, but Leora knew they had to remain vigilant. The Aurelian forces would regroup, and soon they would be back. As the sun set over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the battlefield, Leora took a moment to reflect. They had forged alliances and proven their strength, but deep down she felt a sense of unease. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and they were just beginning to scratch the surface of what lay ahead. Leora could sense that greater challenges awaited them, and she was ready to face them head-on. As the days passed after their successful attack on the Aurelian supply convoy, the atmosphere within the base shifted from cautious optimism to tense preparation. Leora and her team knew that the Aurelian forces would retaliate, and they needed to be ready. The victory had boosted morale, but it also drew the attention of the entire galaxy. The Galactic Council had finally acknowledged their efforts, but they were still far from truly being recognized as allies. In the command center, Leora gathered her team around a holographic display of the battlefield. "We've received intel that the Aurelian forces are regrouping. They're planning a major offensive against us," she informed them, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. Ethan furrowed his brow. "How many are we expecting? Do we have enough resources to hold them off?" "We've got some supplies from our last mission, but we need to use them wisely," Leora replied. "If we can hold the line long enough, the Galactic Council might finally come through with support. But we can't rely on that. We have to defend ourselves." Corin stepped forward, determination shining in his eyes. "Let's fortify our defenses and set traps around our perimeter. We can slow them down and buy time until we get reinforcements." "Good idea," Leora said, feeling the weight of leadership settle on her shoulders. "Let's split into teams. Some of us will work on fortifying the base, while others will lay traps outside. We need to be ready for anything." As they worked tirelessly to prepare for the impending attack, Leora felt the pressure mounting. The stakes had never been higher. She couldn't shake the feeling that this could be their final stand. That night, as the stars twinkled above the base, Leora found herself outside, staring into the vastness of space. She had always dreamed of exploring the galaxy, but now it felt more like a battlefield than a wonderland. Her thoughts drifted to the lives of her comrades and the sacrifices they had made. Each soldier's life weighed heavily on her heart. "Lyora, we need to assess the damage," Ethan said, pointing to the nearby tents where the injured were being treated. "We have to ensure that everyone is accounted for and cared for." Lyora nodded, her heart heavy. She moved towards the medical area, where soldiers lay on makeshift cots, some groaning in pain, others unconscious. Her heart ached for her comrades, but she knew they had to focus on the next steps. "Get those who can stand up and moving," she instructed the medics. "We need to prepare for any possible counterattacks. The Aurelian forces will not take this defeat lightly." As Lyora and Ethan coordinated their efforts, Corrin approached with a worried look on his face. "Lyora, we've received a transmission from the Galactic Council. They want to know about our status, and if we need help." Lyora's brow furrowed. "Help? They've kept us out of the fight for too long. What makes them think we want their assistance now?" "Maybe they finally realized our worth," Corrin suggested, his voice laced with uncertainty. "Or they want to control the narrative," Lyora countered. "They might want to use us as pawns in their games. Whatever their intentions, we have to respond," Ethan added. "We can't turn our backs on potential allies. They might have resources we need." Lyora sighed, torn between distrust and the necessity of forming alliances. "Fine, send them a message. But we do it on our terms. Let them know we've held our ground, but we still need support for what lies ahead." As they prepared the response, Lyora's mind raced with thoughts of the Aurelian forces. She knew the war was far from over, and if they were to survive, they needed every advantage they could find. Later that day, as they awaited a response from the council, a group of soldiers arrived with a shocking report. "Commander Lyora, we found something important." "What is it?" she asked, her pulse quickening with curiosity. "Scouts spotted an Aurelian supply convoy just outside our perimeter. They're vulnerable. If we hit them hard and fast, we can cripple their resources." Lyora's heart raced. This could be their chance to strike while the enemy was weak. "Gather the strongest troops. We'll form a strike team and intercept that convoy." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Are we ready for this? What if it's a trap?" "Then we'll face it together," Lyora said, determination flooding her veins. "We can't let fear stop us. We need to show the galaxy that we're not just survivors. We're fighters." The team quickly assembled, their spirits lifted by the prospect of taking the fight to the Aurelian forces. Lyora's heart swelled with pride as she looked at her troops. They were tired but resolute, ready to take on the challenge ahead. As they approached the location of the convoy, Lyora led her team into a thicket of trees. They crouched low, watching as the Aurelian vehicles moved along the road. Each soldier held their breath, waiting for the right moment to strike. "On my signal," Lyora whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. She could see the supply convoy filled with Aurelian soldiers and equipment. This was their chance. 3, 2, 1, attack. The sound of gunfire erupted as Lyora's team charged forward, their adrenaline surging. The Aurelian soldiers were caught off guard, scrambling for their weapons as Lyora and her team closed in. "Push forward," Lyora shouted, her voice fierce and commanding. "We can't let them escape." With one last nod, they took their positions, hidden from view, but close enough to strike when the time came. As they waited, the tension in the air was palpable. Every second felt like an eternity as they listened for the ominous sound of the Aurelian warship. Then the unmistakable roar of engines broke through the night. The ship appeared on the horizon, its dark silhouette blocking out the stars. Lyora's heart raced. It was time. "Now," Lyora shouted, and Ethan activated the explosives. A loud explosion erupted in the mountains, sending shockwaves through the ground. The blast illuminated the night sky, and the Aurelian warship turned towards the source of the noise, its weapons powering up. Prepare the launchers, Lyora yelled, her voice ringing with urgency. As the ship veered closer, Lyora could see the energy beams charging. Aim for the weak points, she called, adrenaline coursing through her veins. The soldiers steadied their aim, and Lyora's heart raced as she counted down. 3, 2, 1. Fire. The rockets soared through the air, leaving trails of light behind them. Lyora watched, breathless, as the projectiles collided with the ship. Explosions erupted, shaking the very ground beneath them. But the Aurelian warship retaliated. Energy beams shot down, illuminating the dark night. Lyora felt a sense of urgency as she shouted, "Stay focused. Keep firing." They continued to shoot at the ship, but it was fighting back fiercely. The Aurelian warship began to recover, its shields flickering but still intact. Just as Lyora feared they might fail, the ship faltered, a sign that their plan was working. Again, "We can do this," Lyora encouraged her troops, her voice rising above the noise. They unleashed another volley of rockets, and this time, one of the projectiles struck a critical point. The ship shuddered violently, and alarms blared from its exterior. "Yes, keep going," Ethan cheered, his eyes shining with excitement. "We're making progress." But the ship wasn't done yet. It unleashed a wave of energy, targeting the area where they stood. Lyora's heart sank as the blast erupted nearby, knocking her off her feet. "Lyora," Ethan shouted, rushing to her side as she struggled to get up. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she gasped, pushing herself to her feet. But as she looked around, she saw the devastation caused by the blast. Some of their troops were injured, and the urgency of the situation was growing. "Ethan, we have to finish this," she said, her voice steady. "We can't let them recover." Together, they rallied their remaining soldiers, positioning them for one final attack. Lyora felt a fire burning within her, a determination to protect her people and her home. "On my signal," she yelled, her voice strong and unwavering. As the Aurelian warship began to regain its strength, Lyora counted down in her mind. The fate of her people depended on this moment. "Now, fire everything we have." In unison, the remaining rockets launched into the air, creating a spectacular display of light against the dark sky. The projectiles struck the ship with ferocity, and Lyora held her breath, praying for success. Then, with a resounding crash, the Aurelian warship finally broke apart, its shields collapsing under the relentless assault. Cheers erupted from their troops, a roar of victory that echoed through the night. Lyora felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she knew the battle was not yet over. "We did it," Ethan shouted, his face lit with joy. But Lyora remained focused, knowing that they must stay alert. "Let's regroup and ensure everyone is safe," she said, her heart swelling with pride for her soldiers. They had fought together and prevailed against the odds. As they began to regroup, Lyora knew they had taken a crucial step forward. They had faced the unexpected and turned the tide of battle. But in the back of her mind, she understood that the war was far from over. The Aurelian forces would not give up so easily. And now, they had a new challenge ahead. Lyora took a deep breath, preparing for whatever lay ahead. With her loyal team by her side, she felt ready to face anything that came their way. The aftermath of the battle left Lyora and her team in a state of cautious optimism. As dawn broke over the horizon, the first rays of sunlight illuminated the wreckage of the Aurelian warship, a stark reminder of the night's fierce struggle. However, there was little time for celebration. The galaxy was still at war, and new threats loomed on the horizon. As Ethan ran to relay her orders, Lyora turned to Corin. "What do we know about that ship?" "It's the Aurelian warship," Corin explained, his voice tense. "They've been developing it in secret. Its power is unmatched. If they attack us directly, we'll be decimated." Lyora felt a chill run down her spine. "Then we can't let them attack. We need to take it out before it targets us." "Do we have any heavy weaponry left?" Corin asked, his expression growing serious. "Yes," Leora replied, determination igniting in her chest. "We have a few rocket launchers in the supply unit. If we can get them, we might stand a chance." "Then let's move," Corin urged, and together they hurried to gather their forces. As they reached the supply unit, Ethan was already organizing the remaining troops. "Leora, I found some rocket launchers, but we need to act fast. That ship is charging its weapons. Get everyone ready," Leora commanded, grabbing a launcher and testing its weight in her hands. "We'll aim for the ship's weak points. If we can strike hard and fast, we might take it down." The soldiers gathered around, their eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. Leora took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their trust on her shoulders. "Listen, we're going to fight for our home, for our families. We've come too far to let this ship destroy us. We stand together." The soldiers cheered, their spirits lifted by Leora's words. They took their positions, aiming the rocket launchers at the massive ship above. The ground shook again as the Aurelian warship began to charge its weapons. "Ready," Ethan shouted, his eyes fixed on the target. 3, 2, 1, fire," Leora commanded, and a series of explosions rocked the battlefield as the rockets shot toward the ship. Leora watched as the projectiles soared, her heart racing. Would they succeed? The rockets collided with the ship's shield, sending sparks flying. The shield flickered but held strong. Again, Leora shouted, adrenaline pumping through her veins. "We can do this." They fired again and again. The shield started to weaken, but the ship retaliated. Energy beams shot down, striking the ground around them. Leora felt the heat of the blasts, and the fear of loss gripped her heart. "Keep firing," she yelled, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Don't let up." With each launch, Leora felt a surge of hope. The shield finally faltered, and for a moment, it seemed they might have a chance. But just as they prepared for one final shot, the ship unleashed a powerful blast. It struck the ground, sending debris flying and knocking Leora to the ground again. "Leora," Ethan cried, scrambling to her side. "Are you okay?" They pushed into the tent, finding it empty. Leora's heart raced as she realized they might have a chance. "We need to create chaos," she said, looking around for anything they could use. Ethan quickly gathered supplies. Explosives, weapons, anything they could use to disrupt the enemy. "This could give our troops the upper hand," he said, a determined look on his face. With the supplies gathered, they quickly made their way back outside. The battle was still raging, but Leora could see the rebels were losing ground. She felt a surge of hope as she realized they might actually win. "Now," Leora shouted, tossing the explosives toward the enemy camp. They detonated with a loud boom, sending debris flying and creating chaos among the rebels. "Push, now's our chance," Ethan yelled, his voice ringing out above the chaos. The Virelian soldiers rallied behind them, charging forward with renewed strength. Leora felt the tide of battle shift in their favor. They were winning. As they fought together, Leora and Ethan stood side by side, ready to face whatever came next. They had overcome so much together, and now they were united in their fight for victory. The unexpected war had brought them closer than ever, and together they would face the challenges ahead, determined to protect their people and their future. The battlefield continued to rage around Leora and Ethan, the sounds of blaster fire and explosions echoing in their ears. They could feel the energy of their troops surging as they pushed forward, their spirits high after the chaos they had created. Victory seemed close, and Leora's heart swelled with hope. However, amidst the euphoria of their small triumph, something felt off. Leora couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She glanced around, scanning the faces of her soldiers. They looked determined, but a hint of unease lingered in the air. "Ethan, do you feel that?" she asked, her voice low. He turned to her, confusion in his eyes. "Feel what?" he replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "We're winning." "Exactly," Leora said, her brow furrowing. "But something doesn't feel right." Before Ethan could respond, a loud alarm blared from the direction of the rebel camp. "Fall back! Fall back!" the commanders shouted, their voices piercing through the chaos. The rebels were retreating, but it was too sudden, too chaotic. "Something's wrong," Leora insisted. "They're not just retreating. They're planning something." Suddenly, a rumble shook the ground beneath them. Leora turned, her eyes widening as a massive rebel ship descended from the sky. It was unlike anything she had seen before, tall and menacing, with sharp angles and dark armor. It hovered ominously above the battlefield, casting a shadow over their soldiers. "What is that?" Ethan exclaimed, pointing at the ship. "We need to warn everyone." Before they could react, the ship unleashed a wave of blinding energy. It struck the ground, sending shockwaves that knocked Leora and Ethan off their feet. Leora felt herself tumbling, the world spinning around her. She landed hard, gasping for air as the dust settled around them. "Leora," Ethan's voice called out, frantic. She blinked, trying to clear her vision. The battlefield was chaos. Soldiers were scrambling, trying to regain their footing. Leora struggled to stand, her legs shaky beneath her. "What just happened?" she managed to ask, looking up at the dark ship hovering above. "I don't know, but it's not good," Ethan replied, scanning the area. "We need to regroup and figure out what's going on." As they pushed through the debris, Leora felt a growing sense of dread. They had fought so hard, and now everything seemed to be unraveling. They made their way back to their troops, where panic was beginning to set in. "Listen up," Leora shouted, trying to regain control. "We need to stay calm. The rebels are retreating, but we have to be on high alert. That ship is a new threat." The soldiers nodded, but she could see the fear in their eyes. Just then, a figure emerged from the dust, a Virelian soldier named Corin, a trusted ally of Leora. His face was pale, and he looked shaken. "Commander Leora," he called out, rushing to her side. "We have a problem. The ship is armed with energy weapons, and it's targeting our position. Then we need to move." Leora shouted, her heart racing. "Ethan, gather the troops. We need to find cover." Leora and Ethan pressed deeper into the chaos of the battlefield. The sounds of blaster fire and the cries of soldiers surrounded them, filling the air with tension. Leora's heart raced, not just from the adrenaline of battle, but from the weight of her responsibility. She couldn't let her people down. "Stick close to me," Ethan shouted over the din, grabbing her arm and leading her through the chaos. They ducked behind a fallen wall, taking a moment to catch their breath. "Do you see any sign of the rebel leader?" Leora asked, scanning the battlefield. The smoke made it hard to see clearly, but she could make out the shapes of soldiers clashing in the distance. Ethan squinted, focusing on the area where the fighting was fiercest. "Over there," he pointed. "I see a group of rebels with different uniforms. They must be the higher ranks." Leora nodded, her heart racing at the sight. "If we can take him down, it might disrupt their forces," she agreed, determination shining in her eyes. They took a moment to gather their strength and strategize. "We'll need to move quickly," Ethan suggested. "We can flank them from the side." Leora agreed, feeling the urgency of their mission. "Let's go," she urged, and together they sprinted toward the enemy camp, dodging debris and blasts. As they approached, they could see the rebel leader, a tall figure dressed in dark armor. He was shouting orders, his voice booming over the chaos. Leora felt a surge of anger at the sight of him, knowing he was the one responsible for the destruction around them. "We need to get closer," Ethan said, his voice steady. "Once we're within range, we can take him down." They moved stealthily through the shadows, carefully avoiding the attention of the rebels. Leora's heart pounded in her chest as they drew nearer. The rebel leader's back was turned, and this was their chance. "On my count," Ethan whispered, raising his blaster. 1, 2, 3. They both fired their weapons simultaneously. The shots rang out, echoing in the chaos. The rebel leader staggered, caught off guard by the sudden attack. Lyora felt a rush of triumph as she saw him fall to the ground. "Now," she shouted, charging forward with Ethan by her side. But as they approached, the rebel leader raised his weapon, aiming at them with a furious expression. "No!" Lyora cried out, fear gripping her heart. In that split second, she pushed Ethan aside, taking the shot herself. Pain erupted in her shoulder, but she fought through it. The rebel leader fell, finally defeated. "Lyora!" Ethan shouted, rushing to her side. He caught her just as she stumbled, her vision swimming. "You're hurt." "I'll be fine." Lyora gritted her teeth, trying to focus. "We have to get back to the others. We need to hold this position." Ethan helped her stand, his eyes full of concern. "You're not fine. We need to find a medic." "No, we can't lose this momentum," she insisted, determination shining through the pain. "The rebels are already disorganized. We can't let them regroup." Ethan nodded, albeit reluctantly. "All right, but we need to be careful." Together, they made their way back to the front lines. As they approached, they saw that the tide of battle was starting to turn. The Virelian soldiers, seeing their leader fall, were fighting with renewed energy. Lyora felt a sense of hope as she observed the change in her troops. "Push forward," she shouted, her voice ringing with authority. "We have them on the run." The soldiers cheered, encouraged by Lyora's command. Ethan stayed close to her side, ever watchful. Lyora could feel the adrenaline coursing through her, pushing her to keep moving despite the pain in her shoulder. But just as victory seemed within reach, a new wave of rebels surged forward. They were more organized and fought fiercely. Lyora's heart sank as she saw the chaos unfold before her. "We need to hold the line," Ethan shouted, trying to keep their soldiers focused. Lyora could see the fear in their eyes as the rebels charged forward. "We have to take out their command." Lyora yelled back, a new plan forming in her mind. "If we can disrupt their leadership, it might give us the advantage we need." "Let's do it," Ethan agreed, rallying nearby soldiers. They moved quickly, coordinating their attack as they advanced toward the remaining rebel commanders. As they fought through the lines, Lyora felt the fire of battle reignite within her. She fought fiercely, her blaster at the ready. She could see the confusion in the rebel ranks. They were faltering without their leaders to guide them. Just as they reached the command tent, a sudden explosion rocked the ground. Lyora stumbled, falling to her knees. Ethan rushed to her side, worry etched on his face. "Lyora, are you okay?" "I'm fine," she gasped, shaking off the pain. "We have to keep going." Ethan stood beside Lyora, his heart racing. "What's the plan?" he asked, his eyes scanning the area for any signs of danger. Lyora took a deep breath, trying to think clearly amid the chaos. "We need to defend the palace first. If the rebels breach these walls, everything will be lost." Just then, a loud crash echoed from the western wall, shaking the ground beneath their feet. The rebels were already attacking. Lyora's determination solidified. "Let's rally the troops," she yelled, her voice cutting through the noise. Ethan nodded, impressed by her bravery. "I'll gather the human soldiers," he said, sprinting off to find his comrades. As he ran, he felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He had trained for battles, but this was different. This was for an entire planet, for people he barely knew. Meanwhile, Lyora stepped up to the nearest group of Virelian soldiers. "Listen," she shouted, trying to instill courage in her troops. "We fight for our home, our families, and our freedom. We will not let the rebels take what is ours." The soldiers cheered, their spirits lifting at her words. Lyora felt a surge of hope. She looked around and saw her people gathering, united in their resolve. Even in the face of danger, they stood strong. Ethan returned with a group of human soldiers, all wearing serious expressions. "We're ready to help, Princess," he said, his voice steady. "What do you need us to do?" "Form a defensive line," Lyora commanded. "We need to hold them back until we can evacuate the civilians. I want every available soldier on the walls." The soldiers moved quickly, taking their positions. Lyora felt a sense of pride as she watched them. They were fighting not just for her, but for each other. As the rebels approached, the first wave of attackers appeared on the horizon, their figures silhouetted against the light of the two suns rising. They were heavily armed and shouted war cries that echoed in the air. "Ready your weapons," Ethan called out, raising his blaster. The human soldiers followed suit, preparing to face the oncoming threat. The first clash came quickly. The rebels charged at the palace, their numbers overwhelming. Lyora stood at the front line, determination etched on her face. "We will not back down," she shouted, her voice ringing with strength. As the fighting erupted, Lyora fought alongside her soldiers. She had trained for this moment, but nothing could prepare her for the chaos of battle. She ducked and dodged, her heart racing, adrenaline flooding her senses. Ethan fought by her side, covering her back as they moved through the chaos. He admired Lyora's bravery. Despite the danger, she fought fiercely, inspiring her troops to stand strong against the attackers. The battle raged on, and Lyora saw her soldiers faltering. The rebels were relentless, pushing forward with fierce determination. "Hold the line," she shouted, trying to rally her troops. Ethan could see that they were starting to struggle. "We need to push back," he yelled to Lyora. "If we don't, they'll overwhelm us." Lyora nodded, her mind racing. "On my signal, we push forward." She knew they needed a moment to regroup, to regain their strength before launching a counterattack. As the rebels advanced, Lyora raised her voice. "Now, charge." With that command, she and Ethan led their troops forward, pushing against the rebel forces. The ground shook beneath their feet as they clashed with their enemies. For a moment, it felt as though the tide was turning. Lyora fought with all her strength, driving back the attackers. But just as hope began to rise, a loud explosion rocked the area. A nearby building crumbled, sending debris flying. "Watch out," Ethan shouted, pulling Lyora to the ground just in time. They landed hard, the shockwave rattling them. Dust filled the air, making it hard to breathe. "Are you okay?" he asked, looking into her eyes. Lyora nodded, though she felt shaken. "We need to get back up," she urged, determination surging once more. They pushed themselves off the ground, only to see chaos all around them. The rebels were regaining ground, and the Virelian soldiers were losing morale. Lyora's heart sank. They couldn't let this happen. "Sergeant," Lyora shouted, turning to Ethan. "We need to find the rebel leader. If we can take him down, it might disrupt their forces." Ethan nodded, understanding the urgency of her plan. "Let's go." Together, they dashed through the battlefield, dodging blasts and debris. They needed to find a way to turn the tide before it was too late. As they pushed through the chaos, Lyora's resolve strengthened. She knew she had to protect her people, no matter the cost. The unexpected war had tested them all, but Lyora and Ethan were ready to fight. With courage and determination, they charged forward into the heart of the battle, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For a moment, it felt as though the tide was turning. Lyora fought with all her strength, driving back the attackers. But just as hope began to rise, a loud explosion rocked the area. A nearby building crumbled, sending debris flying. "Watch out," Ethan shouted, pulling Lyora to the ground just in time. They landed hard, the shockwave rattling them. Dust filled the air, making it hard to breathe. "Are you okay?" he asked, looking into her eyes. Lyora nodded, though she felt shaken. "We need to get back up," she urged, determination surging once more. They pushed themselves off the ground, only to see chaos all around them. The rebels were regaining ground, and the Virelian soldiers were losing morale. Lyora's heart sank. They couldn't let this happen. "Sergeant," Lyora shouted, turning to Ethan. "We need to find the rebel leader. If we can take him down, it might disrupt their forces." Ethan nodded, understanding the urgency of her plan. "Let's go." Together, they dashed through the battlefield, dodging blasts and debris. They needed to find a way to turn the tide before it was too late. As they pushed through the chaos, Lyora's resolve strengthened. She knew she had to protect her people, no matter the cost. The unexpected war had tested them all, but Lyora and Ethan were ready to fight. With courage and determination, they charged forward into the heart of the battle, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Lyora and Ethan pressed deeper into the chaos of the battlefield. The sounds of blaster fire and the cries of soldiers surrounded them, filling the air with tension. Lyora's heart raced, not just from the adrenaline of battle, but from the weight of her responsibility. She couldn't let her people down. "Stick close to me," Ethan shouted over the din, grabbing her arm and leading her through the chaos. They ducked behind a fallen wall, taking a moment to catch their breath. "Do you see any sign of the rebel leader?" Lyora asked, scanning the battlefield. The smoke made it hard to see clearly, but she could make out the shapes of soldiers clashing in the distance. Ethan squinted, focusing on the area where the fighting was fiercest. "Over there," he pointed. "I see a group of rebels with different uniforms. They must be the higher ranks." Lyora nodded, her heart racing at the sight. "If we can take him down, it might disrupt their forces," she agreed, determination shining in her eyes. They took a moment to gather their strength and strategize. "We'll need to move quickly," Ethan suggested. "We can flank them from the side." Lyora agreed, feeling the urgency of their mission. "Let's go," she urged, and together, they sprinted toward the enemy camp, dodging debris and blasts. As they approached, they could see the rebel leader, a tall figure dressed in dark armor. He was shouting orders, his voice booming over the chaos. Lyora felt a surge of anger at the sight of him, knowing he was the one responsible for the destruction around them. On the distant planet of Varelia, lush forests spread as far as the eye could see, dotted with vibrant flowers and strange, colorful creatures. The skies were a bright turquoise, and two suns warmed the land. It was a beautiful place, but the people of Varelia were worried. They were on the brink of war, and this conflict could change everything. Princess Lyora, the young and courageous ruler of Varelia, stood on the balcony of her palace. She gazed out at her kingdom, feeling the weight of her responsibilities. Lyora was known for her bravery and intelligence. She loved her people and wanted to protect them from harm. However, whispers of rebellion filled the air. A group of rebels, angry about the royal family's decisions, were planning to rise against her. As she looked out, Lyora thought about her late father. He had always told her, "A ruler must be wise and strong. You must protect your people, even if it means making tough choices." Lyora wanted to honor his memory, but she felt unprepared for the challenges ahead. In the palace, the council of advisors gathered. They were older and more experienced than Lyora, but their advice often clashed. "We must prepare for battle," one advisor said, his voice heavy with worry. "The rebels are getting stronger. They have gained support from many of the villages." "No," Lyora replied firmly. "We must find another way. Fighting will only lead to more suffering." She wanted peace, but the council was skeptical. They had seen how the rebels acted, and they feared for Lyora's safety. As the meeting continued, a messenger rushed in, breathing heavily. "Your Highness, the rebels have attacked one of the villages. They demand that we surrender." The room fell silent. Lyora's heart raced. She had hoped to avoid conflict, but now it was here, knocking on their door. "We have no choice," another advisor said. "We must send the army to protect our people." Lyora felt a mix of fear and anger. She didn't want to fight, but she knew she had to do something to help. "Call for the army," Lyora commanded, her voice steady. "But let's also send word to the villages. We must tell them to stay calm and to avoid confrontation. The advisors nodded, impressed by her determination. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of the capital, Sergeant Ethan, a human soldier, had just arrived on Virelia. He was part of a small human contingent sent to assist the Virelian forces. Ethan was a strong and skilled fighter, known for his quick thinking and bravery. He looked out at the beautiful planet, feeling both excitement and apprehension. "Let's hope this mission goes smoothly," he muttered to himself. He had heard stories about the tensions on Virelia, and knew the stakes were high. As he walked toward the military camp, he met other soldiers preparing for battle. They exchanged worried glances, each feeling the weight of the upcoming conflict. Later that day, Leora stood before her people in a grand hall. "We must remain united," she told them. "We cannot let fear divide us. Together, we will face this threat." Her voice rang strong and clear, inspiring hope among the crowd. Ethan watched from the back, impressed by the young princess. He admired her courage and the way she spoke with passion. He felt a connection to her desire for peace, even in the face of war. But as a soldier, he knew that sometimes battles were unavoidable. As night fell, the stars sparkled in the sky, and the tension hung thick in the air. Leora couldn't sleep. She wandered the halls of the palace, her mind racing with thoughts of her people and the rebels. What if they could not win? What if her people suffered because of her choices? Just then, Ethan arrived at the palace to meet with Leora. He had heard of her bravery and wanted to offer his support. When he entered the room, he found Leora lost in thought. "Your Highness," he said softly, trying not to startle her. "I am Sergeant Ethan, here to assist you and your people." Leora turned, surprised but grateful for his presence. "Thank you, Sergeant. I hope we can find a way to avoid bloodshed," she replied, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions within her. "I believe in your vision for peace," Ethan said. "But if it comes to battle, I will protect you and your people." Leora felt a spark of hope. She knew she was not alone in this fight. Suddenly, the ground shook, and the sound of explosions echoed in the distance. The rebels were launching their attack, and chaos erupted in the palace. Leora and Ethan exchanged determined looks. The time for action had come. "Let's go," Leora shouted, and together they rushed out to face the unexpected war that had arrived on their doorstep.